The date was May 27, 1942. The Allied cause in the Pacific hung precariously in the balance. Admiral Chester Nimitz, commander of a severely depleted US Pacific fleet, received his daily intelligence briefing from Lieutenant Commander Redwin Leighton. This was no ordinary assessment. Leighton presented details so specific, so tactically perfect, that they bordered on the divine. He confirmed that the Japanese combined fleet was sailing toward Midway Atoll, providing the precise bearing, the exact distance at which they would be spotted, and the commencement times 07s 00 hours on June 4th. Nimitz understood in that moment that the intelligence community had not just produced a good guess, they had stolen the enemy's master plan. This capability, this ability to read Japan's deepest naval secrets, was the true turning point of the war. A foundation for this victory was laid years before. In the early 1920s, a visionary naval officer named Lawrence Safford, who would later be recognized as the father of US Navy cryptology, recognized that future warfare would be an information war. In 1924, Safford established the Navy's first dedicated code-breaking unit. It was a humble beginning, relying on pencil, paper, and immense dedication. Safford's genius lay in his meticulous recruitment strategy. He sought out individuals with unique aptitudes not just for languages, but for mathematical pattern recognition, a crucial skill for breaking complex ciphers. As tensions rose with Imperial Japan, Safford focused the unit's efforts. He needed linguists who had lived in Japan and understood the culture, the subtle hierarchies of military communication, and the way Japanese officers thought. One of his most consequential recruits was Joseph Rochefort, a natural cryptographer who spent 3 years immersed in Tokyo, mastering the language and culture, a background that proved invaluable in interpreting intercepted messages. In June 1939, Japan introduced their ultimate communications fortress, the JN-25 Naval Code. American analysts designated the 25th Japanese naval system they had identified. JN-25 was an enciphered code, meaning it possessed impenetrable layers of security. First, the codebook messages were converted into 5-digit number groups using a massive dictionary of over 33,000 code groups. A single 5-digit number might stand for a word like carrier, a phrase like prepare to attack, or a location. Second, the additive layer to disguise the original code groups. Operators added a second, randomly generated 5-digit number from a rotating additive book, creating a final transmitted group that bore no obvious relation to the original. This additive table was changed frequently, sometimes every few months. To read a message, the US analysts had to first strip away the unknown additive, then match the resulting code group to its unknown meaning in the dictionary. It was a double lock. By late 1940, American and British cooperation had only identified about 10% of the possible code groups. Then, the setbacks a new code book JN-25B in December 1940. And critically, a major additive change on December 4th, 1941, just 3 days before the attack on Pearl Harbor, temporarily plunging the analysts into darkness. The epicenter of the recovery effort was Station Hypo in Pearl Harbor, a stifling windowless room filled with the metallic clatter of IBM tabulating machines. This was where the eccentric commander Joseph Rochefort thrived. He issued regulation, often working 70-hour shifts in a silk smoking jacket and slippers, fueled by chain smoking and gallons of coffee. But his unconventional approach fostered an environment where genius flourished. The key to their success was the partnership between human intuition and machine processing. Thomas Dyer pioneered the use of the IBM punch card machines, devices typically used for corporate accounting, to automatically sort and cross-reference millions of code groups, identifying patterns that would have taken human teams years to find manually. Meanwhile, the analysts, including experts like Alvin Aswell and former band musicians, recruited for their pattern recognition skills, work relentlessly. The daily challenge was overwhelming hundreds of intercepted, 5-digit number strings. Most messages remained gibberish, but the analysts employed traffic analysis, studying who sent messages to whom, and how often to build context. When a code group appeared frequently between the carrier fleet command and an air unit, they deduced its meaning was likely related to aircraft or fuel. Through this meticulous, tedious work, by April 1942, Hypo was successfully reading about 20% of the messages. And more importantly, they were reading the most crucial 20% of the system. In the late spring of 1942, operational messages began converging on a code group F. Logic and geography pointed to Midway Atoll, but Washington refused to commit the entire carrier fleet based on speculation. Rochefort needed irrefutable confirmation. The deception plan, conceived by Lieutenant Commander Jasper Holmes, was a stroke of genius. Midway was ordered to transmit a clear-text message reporting a severe breakdown of its water purification plant. The message, easily intercepted by the Japanese, quickly circulated through their intelligence network. The wait was agony-setting. Hypo intercepted the confirmation of Japanese message reporting that a fish short of water. The room erupted in controlled celebration. The enemy had confirmed its own target. The final piece of the tactical puzzle was solved by mathematician Joseph Finnegan, who focused on the notoriously secured atatime groups. Finnegan noticed a pattern in how the Japanese encoded the days and months, developing a mathematical check that allowed the team to read the precise timing of operations. The intelligence was complete and massive, for carrier assault would strike Midway on the morning of June 4th. Nimitz had the Japanese plan, but he had a catastrophe in firepower. The US Navy only had two fully operational carriers, Enterprise and Hornet. The third, USS Yorktown, sat heavily damaged in Pearl Harbor, requiring 3 months of conventional repairs. Risking his command and the war itself, Nimitz delivered his famous order the Yorktown would be repaired in 72 hours. The ensuing effort was an industrial miracle. 1,400 civilian workers swarmed the carrier, implementing rolling electrical blackouts across Oahu to power the welding equipment. They cut, patched, and replaced entire sections around the clock. 72 hours later, defying all naval engineering standards, the Yorktown, her hull still scarred, her internal decks a mess of ongoing work, steamed out of Pearl Harbor, joining the ambush task for swaying in the predetermined location. Nimitz was gambling everything on the word of a few cryptologists in a basement. On June 4, 1942, the prophecy was fulfilled. Midway's radar detected incoming aircraft at 07:02 hours, just 2 minutes after the predicted time. The Japanese expected to find a crippled, unprepared force. Instead, they were blindsided. The Battle of Midway was decided when American night bombers caught the Japanese carriers Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu at their most vulnerable moment, refueling and rearming aircraft on deck. The result was instantaneous and catastrophic. Within minutes, 3 carriers were burning hulks. The 4th, Hiryu, was sunk later that afternoon. Japan had lost all 40 aircraft carriers that had executed the Pearl Harbor attack, along with hundreds of irreplaceable veteran pilots and aircrew. The blow shattered Japan's ability to wage an offensive carrier war. When Nimitz received the first reports, he calmly noted to Leighton that their prediction had been off by only 5 minutes, 5 degrees and 5 miles. It was the most accurate piece of tactical intelligence in naval history. Intelligence derived from JN-25, caught in Maftultra, continued to guide every major operation for the rest of the war. Its most dramatic use came in April 1943, when Ultra decrypted the specific travel plans of Admiral Chester Nimitz, the architect of Pearl Harbor. This intelligence allowed his P-38 fighters to intercept and shoot down his transport plane over Bougainville. an operation that demonstrated the sheer strategic power of cryptology. Yet, the victories architects faced immediate professional sabotage. Despite delivering the intelligence that won the war, Joseph Rochefort was stripped of his command in October 1940 and sidelined for the duration, the victim of deep bureaucratic resentment from Washington analysts who disliked his direct line to Nimitz. He received no medal and his contributions were effectively erased from public record. The courage of Nimitz to trust the invisible word of his code breakers, and the tireless, anonymous dedication of men like Rochefort and Safford, redefined modern warfare. But the ability to know what the enemy is planning next. The information war won the Pacific.